G'day guys, you're back with MiracleMAX. I'm on location today at a panel beater's shop having a look at an XR6 that's really not that healthy. The guy was given this vehicle but he wants to get it up and running, so let's check it out together. So she's got a few Ks on the clock, as you can see, 390, 167. So yeah, no doubt she's a little bit tired in some areas, but let's diagnose, not guess. Just having a general look over, the body itself looks quite good. Exhaust manifold looks pretty rusty, but hey, that means nothing. But just a general overview, doesn't look too bad. It's always good to have a good visual before you start anything else. But here for the main event, let's start it up and see what it sounds like. And now you can hear the traditional Ford sound of power. Yeah, she's pretty rugged, isn't it? Hairy as. Let's head back to the exhaust and have a listen. I'll show you a trick. Of course, underneath the vehicle itself you can hear a lot of rattling. Whether that's a catalytic converter falling apart or just exhaust bracket, I'll have to check that later. So you can hear that chuffing out the exhaust like that. There's a bit of smoke as well. What you can do is shove a bit of paper over it. See that? That to me, well, that's old school stuff right there, folks, but most likely exhaust valve. But let's not guess, let's do some proper diagnosis here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is what's called a relative compression test using the pico scope and a current clamp, and the current clamp is the 2001. Just wrap around the battery cable. This case it's a negative cable, and I'm just going to crank it. Of course I'll have to pull out the fuel fuse or relay or something along those lines to stop it actually working. So what we're looking for is changes in the current draw. Okay, that should do us. Let's have a look at the signal there. Well, that is interesting. That's certainly not what I expected. Let's drag down some rulers and have a look at what we have. Let's drag that down to there. We're mainly looking for a variation between them. So I'm going to now get in and zoom in and have a look at what we have to see as a relative compression. Now we're looking for something that's quite low on a consistent level. As you can see over here, there's a low one there. There's another low one there, a low one there. So that's fairly consistent, isn't it? But look, I would expect it to be a lot lower, having that sound that it's got, but it could be anything. It could be anything at this stage. So let's test further. Before I go any further, it's a good idea to do a full system scan and find out if anything is the issue. So let's just check it out, apart from being a Ford. Okay, let's check out the most important one, of course. Let's have a look at the powertrain. And drum roll please. Fuel pump, air conditioning. And that doesn't particularly bother me. It certainly could be a fuel pump issue. If it's lacking fuel or whatever, we can check that. I will look further into that, but there certainly seems to be a miss on one cylinder. We need to isolate that. Okay, well, I just realised that I pulled out the fuel pump relay to do that relative compression test. That still doesn't explain why this is running like a hairy goat. So we'll pull the cover off and have a look at coils and spark plugs, etc. So I'll just start with something basic. I've got the top off for now, and I just want to see if I can isolate which particular cylinder is playing up. Let's have a look here. See if we can pop out some of these coils. Shove him right up against there, of course. Good on you, Ford. Alright, so we know number one's working okay. Let's try number two if it doesn't stall out every time. Number three, no difference whatsoever. Number three's got an issue. Number four's okay-ish. Number six doesn't seem to be making any difference at all. So number three and number six are the faults. Yeah, I can't get off any further, but I've disconnected it. So number three and number six. Okay, so I've pulled out number 3 and number 6 spark plug. I'm just going to run them externally to the engine. I've got my fuel relay removed, so it shouldn't start, and we'll see if the if we can isolate it that it's a spark issue or if it's a fuel issue. It's obviously a spark issue, but is it a spark plug or is it a coil? I can do some swaptronics, of course. In other words, switching one coil to another and see if the fault follows. But at this point I just want to see if there's a spark there or not. May just be a spark plug, hey, who knows. Yeah, there was no spark there whatsoever. I'm going to conclude also that number 6 and number 3 are suffering from the same issue. So do I have any pulse at those coils? That'll tell me if it's a coil or a spark plug issue once again. Let's look at that. In this case I don't need to look at the wiring diagram. If we look here we can see that there's pink, green, there's pink, green, and there's also pink, green. This would be my positive feed to my coils. Sorry about the light, it's not real great. And of course when the ignition's turned on, I've got the other side of my test light attached to ground. That should come to be positive. As you can see, I'm in my positive side of things on the coil, and you can see my LED is red. Now the funny thing is, if I now go to my switching side, that should also glow red at this point in time, just with the ignition turned on. I'm going to hold it here. I'm now going to change my alligator clip from the negative side of things, not sure if you can see there, negative side of things to my positive side of things, and it should switch when it's actually cranked. So let's have a look at that. Okay, we're looking for a switching on the LED test light, so you can crank it, thanks. Yeah. Yep. It's actually cranked. Alright, that'll do. Might be a bit hard to see, but I could see that it was working. Let's try number 6. Now I've tried to do some swaptronics along the way, changing over coils and spark plugs, but I believe that the spark plugs are in such bad condition that I can't really chase it properly. The coils as well, I believe that number 4 and number 6 are dead in the water. I've checked for power as well as switching, and that's fine on all of them. But I'm just going to go back to basics before I have the approval of the customer to get the spark plugs as well as the coils. But before I do that, I want to just confirm that this motor is in reasonable shape, enough to warrant putting that amount of money into it. So I'm just going to do a good old basic compression test. So this is all the spark plugs out. Obviously they're all fouled, there's no doubt about that. But yeah, and keep in mind that I may have switched over some of them, from previous ones that look a bit less fouled, but the others, even though they're not wet per se, these are definitely had it. This is one of the original ones that I pulled out that wasn't working. You can see how wet it is. That's an indication that either the spark plug or the coil is not working. I believe that it's both. Number 1 compression, 175, that's pretty good. Number 2 cylinder, that's what, 175, 180, 185. Number 3 cylinder, getting up to 200 there, getting pretty high. Number 4 was one of our questionable ones, what's that, 185. Number 5, we're looking at 185. And finally, another one that was questionable at the time is 185. Good compressions overall, time to get some spark plugs and coils. Where we are right now with the spark plugs and coils is just one of the problems with this beast. I just noticed looking down when I was fitting the spark plugs. Have a look at that drive belt there, big chunk taken out of it. That needs to be addressed very quickly. Well, that certainly sounds a little quieter compared to what it was. Still got some exhaust leaks, as you can hear. That's going to affect our oxygen sensor. Fuel trims are through the roof, and I believe that's contaminated oxygen sensor. And I'm going to test that further and see what's going on. But hey, look at that. That's nice and even compared to what it was. I've been privileged enough to get my own little shed here to work in. It's pretty warm out in the sun, and of course the glare wasn't great either. Of course there's a heap more fault codes on there as a result of me. I'm not overly concerned about them because I'm going to get rid of them. Let's erase them. Actually, I might take a photo first, that's my rule. Take a photo first and then we can erase them. One has come back, I'm not concerned. The front bumper is missing, so no doubt the condenser is leaking, and that would explain this particular sensor being low, mainly because there's no gas in the system. no concern whatsoever. Let's have a look at our data analysis for a start. I'm just going to get some oxygen sensor as well as fuel trim stuff. Now it says it's not okay, it's not in closed loop at this point in time. Heated oxygen sensor, long term, short term, fuel trims. Now I'm not sure about this fellow over here, that doesn't seem to be right, but who knows, it might even have one, eh? And that's about it. So let's have a look at what we have. Now short term fuel trims going up and down as expected, it's only low. Let's have a look at our oxygen sensor here and see what it's doing. It's bank 1 sensor 1. That appears to be switching okay. This short term's a little bit weird, it's getting higher and higher sort of thing, going up and down. It shouldn't be going quite like that. I think I really need to look at the oxygen sensors physically. I assume, I don't know if there's one or two of them, but that cat certainly sounds a bit noisy, doesn't it? So look, the oxygen sensor seems to be responding. I really physically want to have a look at it first before I make any decisions. So I'm under the car right now, and this model only has a single oxygen sensor, as you can see there. It appeared to be reading okay, but I know one problem with this beast. Let's give the old cat a bit of a hit-a-roo. It's quite hot, that's why I don't want to hit it too hard, but yeah, you can hear it's all collapsed inside. That's not going to be any good. Really, the cat needs replacement before, you know, I can make any other decisions, but there are also some exhaust leaks that I need to attend to. What I'm going to do now is what's called a camshaft crankshaft correlation. It means the relationship between the camshaft and the crank, obviously, and if the timing chain is stretched or jumped or anything like that, because it's done so many Ks, I'm a little concerned that the chain might be stretched, and these are notorious for the guides being damaged as well. So what I'm going to do is do it at the ECU. It's easier than going down there and there to try and find those mongrel little sensors and where they're hidden. These are normally riveted in place. If they're original, you can see there's a rivet. All I've done is cut a slot in it with an angle grinder, and then you can just undo it with a screwdriver. So it's not overly hard, they weren't overly tight. And not only that, you can put them back like that or put in a bolt if necessary. They're threaded down the bottom, so it's not an issue. But I'm going to do it at the ECU, much easier than doing it down at the engine itself. Another thing I've noticed, I was just about to put the ducting back on, and you can clearly see, very common for these, that it's all damaged. They're actually quite a little bit hard to fit at times, and you can see here that someone's just not fitted it correctly and it's torn the rubber and made a mess of it, so he's going to need another rubber. Very common on these things. We've got one at the college that's done exactly the same, but that will allow dust and all sorts of rubbish to come into the engine itself. Whoops, there goes the spring, so I'll recommend that he gets another one of those too. And on the other end of the scale, where the ducting goes onto, you can see how dirty that throttle body is. It's absolutely disgusting. I can't open it because, oh yes I can. Right, Max, there we go. Right, you can see how much carbon build-up is on that blade, so it won't idle properly. My little thumbprint's stuck on there too. So yes, it really needs a good clean. Toothbrush is the best idea with a bit of carby cleaner on it. Should do the job properly. Let's say these little bolts that come out, that's one of these guys here, are shear bolts. So in other words, they have a big bolt head on them, and as you tighten them down, they break off, leaving this flat thing that no one can pull off, and that's designed to keep sticky fingers out. But hey, I'm a sticky finger person, I've got to get in there and do some work, so just take them out. But you can either put these back in, or as you can see, we can just put in a bolt, and nothing special about them. According to our wiring diagram here, you can see that our camshaft position sensor 1 and 2 is B132 and 132.2, something like that, and our crankshaft position sensor is listed as B54. So if we go over the page, now B54 is listed over here, which will be pin number A30 and 41. And if we go over the other page, our other two sensors are B132.1 and B132.2. And you can see that's pin number, this is still in A, pin number 31 and 33. So they're not too far apart. So I'll back probe those and get it set up. So as you can see, I've got the crank and camshaft correlation happening. You can see the two cam sensors in blue as well as red. They seem to line up. But how does that line up with the crankshaft? Look, I don't know. I'm going to have a look for a waveform and see how this corresponds to that one. I've gone onto the TAT site, the Automotive Technician. Lo and behold, I've found a cam and crank sensor correlation. Nice one. Thanks very much, Gary. So I'll have a look at that and see how that compares to the one that we have. So I'm having a look at this screen capture, and of course it's only a PNG, so it's a little bit difficult to manoeuvre, and I don't believe you can put it into Pico itself. But all we have to do is find out this line here, which is off our crankshaft, and count across to here, and we'll get pretty close, I'd imagine. So if we go 1, 2, 3, maybe 3, not 4, I'd say 3. I'd say 3 across is pretty much straight down onto the top of that peak. And of course those peaks for both cams is the same. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3 after our big long, or our missing tooth on the camshaft. So let's see how that relates to ours. We're now on our Pico with our captured waveform, and we started from the bottom of this downward stroke of our crankshaft sensor. So if we count across 3, 1, 2, 3, I'm thinking that we might be heading toward 4 when we get to this one, hey? 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. Look, I'd say this chain has got a bit of stretch. I don't know how much that is in degrees, not exactly sure, but I just want to let the customer know that yes, it's possible that the timing chain has stretched. It's still obviously not jumped or anything, but I'd say that it's definitely stretched. Something to consider. Right, so if we have a look at this pattern, I just thought that perhaps it won't be that hard to figure out how far the chain has stretched. Now keep in mind, if we go from this point over here to this point over here, I've counted all the teeth, but I've also included a missing tooth. So there's actually 36 teeth from here right through to here, including a missing tooth. So there's 35 plus another one there. So 36 teeth overall. That gives us 360 degrees divided by 36, which is 10 degrees. So every one of these guys, of course, from here to here will be 20 because there's one missing. But there's 10 degrees, there's 10 degrees, there's 10 degrees, there's 10 degrees, etc., etc. So I should be able to figure out how far we are out with our degrees. If we slide this back over here, I said 3 downstroke, or the slope, etc. And I'm having trouble trying to get that spot on. Okay, there we go. And we'll bring our other one back to where our camshaft aligns with that, which is over here, isn't it? Which therefore is roughly, we're looking at about, what's that? 1.5 teeth, which equates to roughly about 15 degrees we've got in stretch wise, hey? So one tooth is 10 degrees, and we've got roughly 1.5 there, something along those lines. So I should suggest he's got about 15 degrees stretch of the timing chain. Here we are at the pointy end of the repair. I've done quite a few tests to make sure that this vehicle will run and it's worth spending some money on. It appears to be okay from what I can see. I've done a relative compression test, I've done a physical compression test which proved that the engine appears to be okay. I've done a correlation test between the cam and the crank, and I can see that it's roughly 15 degrees stretched, which is a reasonable amount. I've spoken to the customer about all these things, of course. Catalytic converter is knackered, a couple of gaskets on the manifold are knackered as well, they need to be replaced. What else have we got? Oh, there is that the rubber that goes onto the intake gasket or the intake ducting that really needs to be replaced. That's only letting dirt in, of course, that's no good. Of course, don't forget about that drive belt together with the power steering pump pulley. It's got a big chunk taken out of it, and that's quite bad. Overall, it's not too bad, I guess. It was an interesting exercise to see if the guy got his money's worth out of this particular vehicle. What did he pay for it? Carton of beer, nice. So with the ignition coils and spark plugs replaced, this vehicle is now drivable and hopefully can get it registered. It's been off the road approximately for 8 years, so it's done quite well for itself, all things considered. I hope you got something from this video today, guys, and if you did and you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like and feel free to comment down below. Don't forget about that notification bell. you don't want to miss any future videos. Of course, you can catch up with us on Facebook as well as Instagram. So until next time guys, this is MiracleMAX signing off. I will catch you later.